and we are the applicant's planning agent. I'll just have to ask you to excuse my voice tonight.
There is some water on the table beside you should you need it.
Perfect, thank you. As you've already heard, the property is an assembly of 6 units, 262 to 280 Albert Street, consisting of single detached residential units. This is a shot of the site in a bit of a larger context of the area. You can see the site's proximity to the University of Waterloo, to the ion stations, and some recent development applications surrounding it. So as you've heard, and I'll try and cut down on the duplication, the application is for a 6-story residential building. It's a mix of studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms for a total of 190 units or 225 bedrooms. The application is proposing to provide convertible units on Albert Street on the frontage. And there are mezzanine units both on the Albert Street frontage and on the rear side of the site on the ground floor. The purpose of the mezzanine units for residential uses is to essentially provide a loft-style aesthetic or feeling. And for the mezzanines on the Albert Street frontage as well, the idea is to provide flexibility for future conversion to non-residential uses. So retail, commercial, etc. As you can see from the site plan, vehicular access is proposed to be off of Hickory Street. All car and bicycle parking is proposed to be underground. An amenity for the building is provided through 2 shared spaces on the ground floor and then individual unit balconies. So generally with the proposal, you're seeing kind of a more urbanized site. You're seeing the consolidation of 6 driveways into 1 access point to the site, and a building that is coming up to the street edge and creating a more urban condition and a more improved pedestrian realm. The site is also within a major transit station area. It's within 800 meters of 2 ion stations, the U-Waterloo Ion and the Laurier Waterloo Park Ion stations. So it's also providing transit supportive density and assisting with the MTSA density targets. We are essentially looking for 3 main zoning bylaw amendment requests. The first one is to increase the permitted density to 235 bedrooms for the site. We are also looking to reduce the side yard to 3.3 meters, and we only need this under bylaw 1108. It does meet the new standard under bylaw 2018-050. We're also looking to remove the hold from the site. So those are the 3 main ones that we're looking to do, and we are currently having discussion and working with staff to address the driveway and some architectural projections. So in support of the application, and in particular the removal of the hold, a functional servicing report, a stormwater management report, a traffic impact study, and a noise impact study were submitted, and they all generally conclude that acceptable development standards can be achieved for the site. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I will look to Council. Councillor Henry.
Definitely the opportunity for more urban design discussion.
Yeah, I think that would be valuable. I think without providing any specific comment at this time, I know that it is a very long facade, and the ability to break that up in a way that's beyond just material would probably be beneficial to the pedestrian realm. I know there are a couple of examples in the neighborhood which have longer facades and have managed to jog some of that in a way that creates some more interest. And I think should there be an interest, and as staff has proceeded, I'd be happy to have conversations further to if density bonusing is an appropriate vehicle and an available vehicle, what would be appropriate to consider, because my guess is the time to get an agreement done on those is short if everybody proceeds in a way that can allow that to happen, and that should allow that to happen.
Any other questions for the delegation from Council? No? Okay, thank you very much for coming in. If there are, now I would like to ask the people in the gallery, is there anyone else present here tonight who wishes to speak to this application or to this presentation? No takers? Okay. We're not scary. Feel free to come up. Okay, so if there are no more delegations, this informal public meeting is now concluded. Staff will review the issues and provide further reports to council at a later date. Now can someone please get Councillor Freeman? Thank you. So now we're moving on to item 7B. This is a formal public meeting to consider item 7B. This is the official plan amendment number 20 and zoning change application Z1804 for Club Willow Wells at 40 Blue Springs Drive. Any persons who want further notice of this application, including the passing of any bylaws, should sign the appropriate register in the binder located at that desk at the rear of the council chambers. Again, there's more than one binder this evening, so please ensure that you are signing the appropriate one. And will the clerk now please advise council of the method used to give notice of the meeting and the dates that notice was given?
Notice was advertised in the Waterloo Chronicle on May 23rd, 2019, and mailed or emailed on May 21st, 2019, to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property, to public agencies, to all persons who signed in or spoke at the informal public meeting held on March 26, 2018, and to all persons who requested further notice.
Great, thank you. And now our planner, John Voss, will give a brief overview of the application. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the committee, staff, and the public.
RMU 60, so the rest of it should be RMU 60, as opposed to designating it as RMU 40 with site-specific provision that says they can go up to 52 meters. Just comments on that, I guess.
Through you, Chair, it's an interesting idea. When we look at the zoning under 2018, it's hard to see on the screen here, but these other properties, they're RMU 40, which represents the height of those buildings, roughly around, I think it's 6 stories, roughly is the taller ones. And when we look at the RMU zone, there's certain categories of heights and certain regulations for each of those categories. So the 40 will permit things that are shorter than 40. And so when we do zoning, what's easier, it seems to work better with the other regulations that are within the 40 zone versus the 60 zone to apply the regulations under RMU 60 and then bring down the height relating to density and separations and height requirements. The RMU 40 has different podium requirements and tower requirements, whereas the R60 has much more appropriate ones.
So through you, Chair Bonagor, you're basically saying that if we were to change it from to RMU 40, there would be a lot more than just the height that would need to change given what's there. Is that?
That'd be correct. And for a future developer to then make those changes is another whole process for them to do so. So it's unlikely that would happen.
Right. So from your perspective, designate this as RMU 60 with the site-specific provisions does not set a precedent in your from your perspective.
Through you, Councillor Councillor Bonagor. I would say no, it doesn't set a precedent because Council's decision tonight, if they support the application, is saying the precedent is 52. That is the permitted height requirement that Council is permitting. To increase that or change that would have to go through a full review and discussion as to why anything different would be appropriate and the appropriate approvals accordingly.
Any other questions from Council? Yes, Councillor Henma.
Thank you, Chair Bonagor, through you. Just a question regarding comments and concerns, as we were not part of the informal meeting, and just curious if all of the issues that, or
that were raised during that process have been addressed, and if there are any that are really outstanding that we should be aware of.
Through Councillor, I believe the applicant will discuss that and a lot of the iterations of the plans as they've changed over the years. It'll be really interesting, I think, to see how it's changed and how they got to this final design. So I'll leave that for the applicant to discuss.
I'll hold the question. Thanks.
If there are no further questions from council, I'll thank you, Mr. Voss, for bringing that presentation. We have one registered delegation, and that is Chris Pigeon from GSP Group. So I invite you to the podium.
Thank you, Chair and members of Council. I'm Chris Pigeon with GSP Group. I'm the planning consultant to Club Willow Wells, and there are 324 owners. I've never really worked for an ownership group quite that large before. A number of the board of directors and owners are here this evening. Maybe just by a show of hands, who's from Willow Wells community? And they all would like to speak tonight. No, I'm kidding. That's right. So maybe just to give you a brief bit of history, Council. So the Willow Wells community is comprised of 6 condominiums: the Waterford, Cloisters 1, 2, and 3, the Willowbrook, and the Atrium. So there's a total of 324 units, or 324 owners, who are responsible for the maintenance of the ponds, the open space, and the rec complex known as Club Willow Wells, which is actually a part of the open space ponds and boardwalks and the outdoor amenity areas. So Club Willow Wells was not being used extensively by the owners, and it was in need of some significant repairs. And as a result, the community came together and were looking for alternatives, and that included a way of lowering their common element condominium fees that they all contribute to maintain the ponds, the open space, and the biggest cost, of course, being that recreational complex. So those 6 condominiums looked at 5 options of what to do with Club Willow Wells. And the majority of the 324 owners voted in favor of the pursuit of redevelopment of the Club Willow Wells recreational facility. So in essence, these owners are putting in place, are readying the site for prospective developers. And what they wanted to do was to manage or control the amount of development that could take place on that block so that it would fit into the overall Willow Wells community. And the way to do that, of course, is that they progressively led the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment process that's before committee this evening. And there will be a future severance to sever this site from the open space and the pond block. So the development concepts that were considered by the owners, they evaluated 3 preliminary design schemes with various heights and configurations. And what they wanted to do was really manage the height and the massing of the buildings that would fit into the character of the Willow Wells community so that they wouldn't negatively be impacted. They didn't want to simply sell the block and let a developer come forward with their vision. They wanted to manage that through this OPA-ZBA process. So the first scheme was a slab building design. And you can see, especially in the right-hand schematic, those slab buildings simply overwhelmed the Willow Wells community. The second scheme was more of a point tower design, so 2 point towers. And again, you can see in the schematic, just the overall scale of those buildings overwhelmed the community. So the third scheme that they considered was more in keeping, a better scale, but the tower configuration would have cast shadows over the Cloisters condominiums, which are located to the east. And that was not acceptable to the ownership group. So the preferred development concept is a single tower, and as Mr. Voss pointed out, that would be located in the southwest, so the furthest distance away from the existing condominiums, and we would then impose building limits and setbacks. The informal public meeting was held last year. It was in March 2018. And the concept that was presented at the time was a 15-story tower with a 5-story podium. So that L-shaped portion of the building is the podium. We showed this graphic, which proposed accesses using or sharing, if you will, the Waterford condominium driveway, which is immediately to the west. And that gave some residents some concerns about the sharing of that access. So as a result, Councillor Freeman suggested that we hold an additional neighborhood information meeting. That was held on August the 15th, 2018. Councillor Freeman and Mr. Voss attended. And at that meeting, we provided clarification to all of the owners who attended, of the 324 owners, clarification on that shared driveway, that in fact we could separate it. And we provided them with two options, so a 15-story development option and a 13-story development option. That information exchange then went to the Board of Directors, and on September the 6th, they agreed, all 6 condominium agreed to select option number 1 that is before you this evening. So this is the preferred development concept. It's that L-shaped building, an L-shaped podium, 15 stories overall with a 6-story podium, 182 units, and as Mr. Voss indicated, 196 or 95 parking spaces. And of course, we addressed the shared driveway. It has a standalone driveway on this development block. So a number of site-specific zoning provisions in place, and I agree with Mr. Voss's commentary about a developer coming forward and trying to do something that would be outside of these 3-dimensional setbacks that we've set in place. He would have 324 owners scrutinizing any revisions that he or she would like to make to this development concept. So you can see the rationale again was really to put in place the massing of the building through setbacks and building heights and step backs in the building to ensure that there are no shadows that would be cast on any of the 6 condominium developments. So just some conceptual design options. So a view from Blue Springs Drive. This is a view looking across from the cloisters, across the pond to the rear portion of the building. And then another view of Blue Springs Drive looking to the west towards King Street. So we have reviewed the staff report, and it was very thorough, comprehensive, and addressed all of our concerns, and we respectfully request that committee and council approve Fish Plan Amendment number 20 and the zone change application Z1804 as set out in the staff report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for leading us through that. It sounds like it's been quite a fascinating process for all involved. I'd like to look to council now if you've got questions of the delegate. Councillor Hanmer.
Thank you. Through you, probably more just a comment. Thank you very much for the presentation, and you did answer my question that I had of staff, that it appears that all of the issues that were raised by the residents at the time have been addressed in the new proposed site plan. So thank you very much for that.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions from council? No, it doesn't appear to be. So I'd like to thank you very much for coming and presenting to us tonight.
Thank you.
We don't have any other delegations registered, but I'd like to invite anyone who is here, if you would like to speak on this matter, you are more than welcome to do so. This is the People's Room. So it's not too scary. Just if you would like to speak, I invite you to just come up, state your name and your municipality and what you'd like to let us know. Yes, please come up. Oh, if anyone else is interested in speaking, if you'd like to also maybe form a small queue or something, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Jerry McKenzie, regarding 30 Blue Springs. I was unfortunately away during the last meeting, and I just wanted to hear what the rationale was between choosing a 15-story building versus a 10 to 13-story building, please. Is somebody able to answer that question for me? Because I would think that most of the residents would be more in favor of a 10-story building rather than a 15-story building, so that it wouldn't overwhelm the neighborhood.
It looks to have been a decision of the board, at the condo board, but can I look to...
Not getting their mail, not paying attention really. So personally, is there any way to rework some of the factors of the development to bring the height down? Because quite frankly, if you're familiar with the buildings and the character of the neighborhood, the development as it is currently shown really does not fit into that character, particularly from a color scheme perspective, and from just the overall sight lines and height of the buildings that are to be included. The current 9 stories, which the atriums share where I used to live, it's a completely different character, if you will. So personally, I think if the height of the, what is it, the 2 wings,
the podium?
The podium, thank you. If you bring that up by 2 floors, you can bring the whole thing down to 10 stories and less. And then you'll have the same number of units. And of course, the other thing that I feel probably could be changed is the colors. Like a dark gray, black, Death Star motif. It does not fit the beige sandstone natural colors of the current colors of all the buildings around it. So I also noticed there was some issues with the rear setback of the building was not in compliance with, I believe, the minimums or maximums. And the number of visitor parking spaces seems oddly low. I can tell you at 30 Blue Springs, there's never any visitor parking available, and they have substantially more than the 9 that are currently allocated. And they have substantially fewer number of units in their building. So I'd just like to put that out there. I don't know if there's any way to go back and make some changes to all of this, but thank you very much.
Thank you for speaking this evening. I don't believe that there is anything that council can do when it comes to facades. So I don't believe that's under our purview as it is. But John, did you want to speak to anything from that? Or Mr. Pigeon?
Yeah, Chair, so I think it's important that for the residents that the building that you saw tonight is a concept. It is not the building that's going to be built. So Club Willow Wells is, assuming that the zoning is approved, will then be going to market, and they will be setting, through agreement of purchase and sale, terms that they will control the architectural design of the building, for example. As far as the height goes, and all 6 of the condominium boards were fully aware of the recommendation by Club Willow Wells of the 15 stories, and their representatives in each of the 6 condominiums was tasked from August 15th to September the 6th to find out what the membership wanted to see, and 15 was what ultimately was agreed to, with all of those provisions in terms of setbacks and whatnot. So the majority ruled according to the board of directors, and that's how we arrived at it. But the color scheme is, something that'll be dealt with by the board of directors in the future when a purchaser is known.
Thank you for the clarification. Councillor Vasic, did you have a question?
Through you, Chair Bonagor. This is for staff. I know there was another email that Council got asking about keeping the height in the downtown, which made me wonder, as we intensify, what do we as a city consider the downtown? Pardon me? Do we have like a definition or a vision of what downtown includes?
Through you, Chair, in terms of, just to clarify the question, asking where does uptown end and where does the rest of uptown, downtown, uptown, whatever we all brand it as such, but where does that line start and stop? Is that the question? Yeah. Okay. When we look at the official plan and the zoning, new zoning framework, for example, there's an uptown zone and an uptown growth area that's been designated by the province and identified as the uptown area. The uptown BIA is slightly different, but when we look at the uptown area, I think generally when we get up towards Laurier, that's where uptown ends, and then beyond that is the rest of the city. So uptown area, that north border, I'd say, is about the Laurier area, University Avenue. It's hard to pinpoint exactly where because everyone has their own definition of that, but that would kind of be this point. So I'd suggest this property is not located within uptown Waterloo.
Then is it, I can't think of the right word, but is it weird or out of context or out of character for this then to be a more intense, since it's not in the uptown where I think the community has a sort of like perception that intensification should just be within those boundaries?
Through Madam Chair, good question. There's a lot of development encouraged in Uptown, and we are seeing a lot of development. But with our growth boundary within the city, we're going to see development throughout. And so the height and or the nodes and corridors policies that we have identified certain areas where development will happen. Outside of those nodes and corridors, development will not happen as much. This property is within one of those nodes, and so this is identified as an area where further development and intensification is encouraged because of that node classification or corridor classification.
Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Bodley.
Sorry, thank you. Through you, Chair Bonagor. These questions are making me lead to more questions, I guess. So in terms of trying to understand how the proposal between the 12-story buildings and the 15-story building, less or more, came about, is it on these other sites that are around this area that are RMU 40, are they RMU 40 with no restrictions?
Through Chair,
having gone through that with everybody, I think that's extremely valuable. But for me as a councillor, when I'm looking at rezoning this parcel of land for development, given that all the other properties around it are RMU 40, I would have a really hard time saying that an RMU 40 designation is out of character for the area. And so if this was rezoned to RMU 40 to be in line with everything else, then what would happen is we would get those. We could theoretically get the two tower situation that that Chris was talking about earlier, which would have potentially caused shadows into the other properties. Was that part of the? Is that sort of how this came about, as opposed to why like a 10 or an 8 or a 9-story building were not considered? Because this area, clearly based on the zoning for the properties around it, does make sense from an RMU 40 perspective. Is that fair to say?
Through Chair, there's a lot of little details in that and consideration.